Hello and welcome to this, your fourth tutorial on the emissions calculator app. This week we're going to cover the app deployment task. So at the end of this week, within the deliverables, your app should be up and running, ready for you as part of the team members to start collecting your emissions information for the time to come throughout the semester. Specifically, this week, you will learn to first synchronize the database to the Heroku app. Then you will sync your GitHub repository, the one that you've been working with the last weeks, with a cloud machinery, specifically the Heroku machinery. Third, you're going to define your environmental variables, and I will explain that later on one of the following slides. So you could use this one, or at least the setting that we're going to build up for the environmental variables, as a first stage security measure. Thereafter, we're going to cover some of the Heroku basic functions. And we close out with two additional sections, section 5 and 6, which are optional at the end of the video. In one, I'm going to explain how to deploy your app by yourself, meaning not as part of a group. And last but not least, I'm going to have a walk through the code that triggers, or at least move out all the machineries and gear behind the app that you have built for this module. Without further ado, I'm going to open up the Heroku website. As soon as you access through your website, you may find a dashboard looking like this. In here you have no information so far, but you should have been included in one of the group members. I'm gonna take group 1 as an example today, but if you belong to group 2, then it should show up here below teams that you are a member of the group number 2, the same for group number 3. In here, when you got the personal tab on, that means that all the apps that are gonna be included here belongs only to you, are not visible to anyone else. Though for this tutorial, we're gonna go straight to the teams section, and then we will have the options open for you as part of, as a team member of your group. There are very few options related Heroku, at least on this stage. First of all, your profile information is in here, including your account settings, if you'd like to receive some notifications. Excuse me. Or if you'd like to sign out and change your account. Every time you like to come to your base dashboard, just go and press on the Heroku logo, and it will take you back to your personal dashboard. Now, additionally, you will find out tabs that I have given you permissions. For instance, this account only is a member. The admin is going to be me, meaning that I'm the only one capable or with rights to delete both the group and the app. Also, in the settings, you will only have the options to transfer apps. We're not going to cover that on this tutorial. Back to the app section. Our next step is going to be to how to create the new app. I suggest you that within the group members, you choose one of your members and follow up the instructions as I'm going to provide in this tutorial, because otherwise we'll have several apps, and the whole goal of this is just having a single app for the whole group. Perhaps the app developing team could assign the leader or the manager for that week to do this task specifically, though he could use the help of all the other members belonging to the group, the app development group for that week. So we go and press on create a new app. That should open a website or at least a page like this. We can introduce something easy to remember because this is going to be part of our URL or the website name. Let's call it group 1. Perhaps we'll just leave it like this. Well, it's not available. ENE 45. So in here you are not allowed to put underscores or capital letters. Everything needs to be in lowercase, and if you like to add additional words you can separate with just a dash. Okay, seems that is available. We're going to choose as a region Europe, and then we're going to press create an app. Okay, so then it opens up the dashboard for your app generation. Once again, if we go back to the dashboard, anytime that we like to access to the app, we first have to go to the group, and then you have the app in here, and you press there and you get it. Alright, so our next step now will be to build up the database where the information is going to be stored from now on. We do so by going through overview, then we press configure add-ons, and then within the search bar below add-ons we're going to type in Postgres and select the very first option. Important notice, in here you're going to have several plans, including plans that where you have to pay for. This is connected to a credit card, meaning that any change, or at least if you keep for a long time changes on paid premium options, that will be charged to the credit card assigned to this account. Thus, since we have some limited budget, we're going to keep it easy. So in this case, we're going to select the free version, just the first one, the default, right? Once we are certain that we got the default free selection, we just submit the form and should have something like this. Very nice. If we go back to the overview, we realize we already have the Postgres as part of our deployment app. So we're going to start now delivering or at least explaining and implementing environmental variables. The environmental variables, first of all, has two sections. One is a key, which point directly to a hidden value. And we're going to use this because we are expecting to hide a specific password that we don't want anybody else out of the group of the Heroku app could see it. For instance, we don't want anybody checking out our public repository and identifying a free database for them to either hack, use, or hamper. So that's why we're going to use environmental variables. So it is a common practice to use it to hide passwords, though it's not the safest one. I choose it because it's the easiest. Another options to hide passwords, you could use things like access keys. Those are like files, like specific files that are destroyed from the supplier once you download them, and you're prompted or requested to present that file key every time you are loading or accessing your app or online service, etc. There are also private services called vaults where you could store passwords inside after some authentication options. There's the option of the two-factor authentication. The best way to explain two-factor authentication is with an example. For instance, when you're checking out your bank account, for accessing the app, first you need to introduce a password, or it will be the other way around. You need to introduce or at least check your bank ID first, then you are given the option to access to a place where you can put your password in. So the first factor will be the bank ID, the second factor will be your own password for that app. Important, we're going to be handling the database password inside the repo, inside the Heroku, but do not, I repeat, do not post your database password inside the README file. Never. Because even if it is private, you may have people contributing with you that may steal your password and do harm on your app. Since this is a public repository, then the risk is even higher. So never post your passwords inside a README file within your repository. All right, so back to the website. Given that we already built our database, the next thing to do will be to set out the environmental variables. Once again, you would rather prefer to do this once, or at least one person from the whole group should do this. For setting the environmental variables, go on Settings, then go all the way down where it says Reveal Configuration Variables. In there, you will have a key called database_URL and then a value. This is gonna be the specific access to the Postgres that you just created. The only thing is that we're gonna make sure that the name is database_URL, all in cap letters. We will not change anything here. We will keep it as it is. The second thing is like we're gonna include something called external DB, external_DB, everything in cap letters. And we're gonna include a specific, let's call it password, that I'm gonna provide to you guys by a safe access. I will give you more information the next week on where to access to the password. So far I'm just gonna add it here, and we are gonna introduce a third environmental variable called group_name, and we're gonna set in the name of the group all in lowercase. For instance, this is group 1 all together. For group 2, this is going to be group 2. And for group 3, this is going to be group 3. All together. Without spaces. Okay. Once you're done with this, we will just add. And that's basically it for the environmental variables. Alright. So we already got the database running. We got the environmental variables running. Our following step will be to synchronize the GitHub account and specifically the repository that we've been working with the last couple of weeks. Synchronize it with your Heroku application. So we go on deploy. There are options called deployment method. We're gonna press in where it says connect to GitHub. And well, so far it recognizes my account, but you will be prompted to include or at least to log in into your GitHub account, and it will detect it afterwards, including the repositories or the groups where you're belonging to. For the case of this group, we're gonna access through 425 group 1. The repo name is gonna be, perhaps we could open this briefly. Group 1, the repo name is emissions calculator group 1. I'm gonna copy this, introduce that there, and just press search. If the name is correct, it will automatically detect the repository name, and we will just press connect. So what's happening now? We have so far our repository with the Python file connected to the Heroku app, which has the machinery to run the app as commanded within the repository. So we need to set up some additional options. For instance, we're going to set this one called enable automatic deploys. And what it basically do is that it detects whenever anything changes within the repo at the GitHub account that we sync, and it automatically deploy the app or make changes within the app. You could make changes like colors, changes within the machinery of the app itself, etc., etc. Okay, so we will keep it enabled. Now, the important step for today, after we have followed every single step, is to deploy the branch manually. Manually deploy. That means that it will take whatever is in our GitHub repository and we'll start running it. We'll just go and press in, deploy branch, and wait for the deployment to be done. I'm gonna speed up this one. It takes a couple of minutes. Just be patient and wait for it. So this section basically signals whenever the app is up and running. Though for you to confirm that the app is running, you should go and press within this section called this button called View, and it goes and open the app. If you press that button and nothing happens, that means that there might be an issue and probably I may have to troubleshoot or debug the code to see what's going on. Another way to go through the app is coming all the way back, pressing settings, and identifying within your domains what's the name of your app. So if you take this one, open any of your browser pages, let's go and search, then your app should be up and running. So what happened now? Since this app was done for group 1, that means that only people from group 1 could come in and access. All right, we're just gonna keep this app up and running in standby, and we're gonna explain some very important information now that you're belonging to a Heroku group. So you will all have rights to adjust settings, but by all means, and this is an important notice, avoid the resources tabs. Is this tab over here? Okay, I will show it to you. If you're within your options, you can also access resources, but avoid this section because there's a specific area that is very sensitive and at the same time critical in terms of cost. If you try to go and change the dynotype, the first thing is like I will notice immediately as I am the administrator and I have notifications, but then you realize how expensive it could become, right? So never go on and press on the change dynotype. It will only be me, the administrator, the one that will control the changes in the dynotype, because I'm also controlling the budget for your project. All right. So to avoid any issue, just avoid pressing the resources site. You can go on overview, you can check deploy, you can view out the metrics if you have access to the activity, like what's going on with the logs, settings, etc., etc. But avoid going through resources. Okay. Back to the app. Right. So if you're belonging to group 1, for instance, and I am, you could access via your student number as and any of these your specific number. That, for instance, And the password is gonna be, I will type it to you also in a safe channel. Okay, instead I will just erase this and I will put the correct one for me. It should be something like this. For you, it's just the user, the student number. Alright, you should be able to access your own group specific page if you realize there's nothing in here because your group does not have any information so far. But then, as this is up and running and is available for every one of your team members, you should start collecting the information from the next week on. And this will be important, or at least I hope this will be an important tool for your final project at the end of the semester. Remember that to submit a new record, you just go in here, check out the kilometers that you have travel within a type of transport. We call it bus, car, plane, ferry, etc. Select the type of fuel. Perhaps that's an investigation you could make yourself. You could, I don't know, if you go on a taxi, you could ask the taxi driver, or you could have some information if the car is a hybrid, petrol, diesel, or is just an electric car, which stands for no fossil fuel. You can press petrol, and we set in the day. Let's put it today. All right. We submit. And as soon as we go back to the index, we should have a new record for the specific date. For me specifically, meaning that if some other team members add the records, they will keep adding it here. And also the cumulative of all of our team members will show up on this graph at the right. This graph is going to show the comparison among groups. So you could have, or you could make this app, or you can look at the results after you finish gathering the information at the end of the semester. And you can compare changing habits within groups, and perhaps explain why your group was higher, what the other groups was higher, and what type of solutions you propose for reducing emissions within your groups. Also remember, you got the option to check just records per transport type. Additionally, you can select a record for editing. You can either change whatever was inside, like the kilometers, the type of fuel, etc., or you can delete altogether the record. Okay, we're not gonna delete it yet. Remember, to when you finish, you can either log out or you can just keep it up. After a while, if you are not logging in again, it will prompt you to introduce your login credentials. There's an option to download whatever is inside. It will give you a CSV file that, when open, will just copy up the records that the system has provided to you, or at least the ones that your own group has provided to the system. In this case, this is the group 1 records. It's only we only have the information that I just introduced a couple of minutes ago. Okay. I am deleting this record to have a fresh start with this group. And that should clean everything up for group 1. And I'm logging out. Alright, so this week we learned how to sync and create a database to the Heroku app. We did so with Postgres. We learned how to sync your GitHub repository with the cloud machinery, specifically on the Heroku case. We defined the environmental variables and used them as a first stage security measure. We explained out some of the basic functions of Heroku, and I stressed out on sections that you should avoid to avoid having problems. At least that we have problems later on with the bills and stuff. Okay, so for next week, the deliverables will be, first of all, the app development group has a very important task within hands, and that's basically running the app. We would like to see at the end of the week that all the groups have their app up and running. And we're also looking forward to watch out records from your emissions starting from a week from the following week. The week, what is it? Week 7? Not sure though. But well, yes, as soon as the app is running from the next Sunday on, we expect you guys to have your records, start updating your own records on emissions. The hierarchy group also have important things to do. You need to update the steps to bring the app live. Again, do not post the passwords. Those are very important for the group and they should be kept private. And we have a couple of questions that we may have to address. Diary group may also, with the help of all the team members, not just Diary group, but also app dev and the methods group, answer these 2 questions below. The first one is, what other cloud service can be used to deploy apps from GitHub repositories? And perhaps this might look familiar, but then I identified that nobody has answered this question from task 1 yet, so that's why I'm bringing it back over again. And question 2 is, what options would you consider to make your app safer against attacks? It could be anything. There's no right answer in either of those, just your opinions, and your opinions are great in that aspect. So for instance, what would you do to prevent abusive requests that could crash your server? That is like when a single user makes a robot with code and the robots just like try sending applications all at the same time to make your app fall down and crash. That is very critical, at least when you are competing with others. You would like to have your app up and running all the time. Another example is the password theft. Like, what would you do to keep the password safe from external users for hijacking it or taking it without permission? Right? For the method groups, well, the task will not change much, or at least at all. Remember that your function is critical for the proper development of the app later on. We're going to cover on task 5 a whole section about methodology. So it will be important to see out the outcomes of your research, of you browsing out different type of methodologies to calculate emissions. So keep adding methods to your README subsection. Excuse me. From there, if there's any question, I encourage you guys to either send me an email or type in your questions in the discussion board that we have on Canvas. And we are going to close the tutorial for this week in here, and then we're going to continue with the optional sections. Hello, welcome again. We are going to start the optional section on how to deploy your app by yourself, or at least individually. First, I have to make a disclaimer. If you want to create a new app, you can do it for free, though the Heroku will request to have your credit card as a backup for the case where you increase your resources. They can charge you somewhere. So that's a disclaimer. Fortunately is free. Unfortunately, is not without tithes. What we have done for you is like we created the groups with the single credit cards, so we are handling that by ourselves. So you don't have to worry about it. But if you want to keep or make your own app and you want to maintain it for the years to come, show it to your friends or to potential interviewers, then you have to include your credit card number as part of the system or as part of the account. All right. So the steps are pretty similar to what we have done within the groups app. In here, you're gonna go to your personal dashboard, create a new app, give it a name. Try to give it a cool name because this is gonna be the first section of your app, such as dashboard. So whatever you include here, the app name is gonna be included before the Heroku.com or etc. So put a name. I like to put short names. That's taken by me already. This is an example. Check out Europe because we're in Europe. If you are following us from the US or such, that's obvious. Change it to US. That helps out in the loading of the page. It's faster when you have a closer server like Europe. Go and create the app. If you prefer to, you can also go on and take your database from Postgres. Make sure it's free, or if you like to upgrade the stats of the database, go on and choose the one you prefer. We're gonna keep it with free. It's gonna be enough. Alright, we got that ready. We go on settings, reveal the configuration variables. We make sure that the first one is the database we just created. Once again, external DB. You could even, okay, let's change this because you're gonna have a solo site. We're gonna add another Postgres. You can have several Postgres altogether. Alright, another submit order. We go back to settings, and you realize you will have two Postgres. Alright. If you do prefer, you can call this one external DB by adjusting the key. Well, you cannot. So what I'm going to do is going to copy the value, press external, or type in external DB, copy the value, add. Okay, cancel this one, close this. Alright, cannot do this. Well, never mind. You have demo. Okay. You can put something like group name. Yeah, you prefer, you can write in admin, and that will be completely fine. Alright. So go back to deploy, connect to GitHub, setting the repository. In this case, you can either take the repository of the group, but I recommend you to have control of your repository for the years to come. To get the repository from the group, copy it, download it, and then upload it to your personal repository. Okay, you can change the name if you like, and you're gonna call it here, connect it. Okay, I don't know. So I don't got any repository called like that. I completely forgot how this was full. I'm gonna check now. Permissions up. Okay, it shows up. You choose whatever repository you like to use. Let's connect to this one. Right, once again, enable automatic deploys, and then when you deploy branch, it will start collecting all the information from your GitHub and running the repo. I will not press it now because I don't want it to run. Right, anytime that you run this, well, I guess I may have to. Well, I will just stop this. No. Anytime you like to erase this app, you just go in here and delete app. It requests you to type in this information again, and you close everything including the databases. right? So an important piece of information that I would like to share with you is that once you got your app up and running, you have a section called resources where you can change out the types of, they call it dynos. Dynos are like the machinery you like to use. In the personal site, you can use a free version. For your team, we're only allowed to use from the hobby version, meaning like from $7 per month and on. In here, you're allowed to use the $0 per month. However, it's going to be quite slow. It will not have enough resources to handle large amounts of customers trying to reach your website at the same time. Meaning that you can scale up by either selecting one of these professional stuff and then upgrading the number of dynos, so on and so forth. Of course, the numbers start scaling up, and this is monthly, meaning that if you use it like for 3 minutes, it will prorate the time with the monthly cost, right? Just be aware of that, and it will start charging unless you change it back. Okay, I'm gonna put this on free again, save, and they will stop charging me later on. Okay, whenever you like, once again, to release this, you go and delete the app, and that will be basically it. With that, I'm closing this optional section. I'm gonna start the following optional section that is about a walkthrough around the app to see how does the code runs and how does the code performs. I'm just going to open one of your examples within your group repositories. Okay, so remember from our previous lectures that we had several files. I will make a brief review on those. On static files, we got the fab icon, the small image in here. Within templates, we have the design of all the websites, page by page, within our app. In profile, there's information of how from the web it has to connect to a unicorn that works as our interface, the WSGI, as we explained in task 3. And the WSGI makes all the instruction to the app. Okay, so basically it's like it takes the app UI, call it app, transfer through the interface, and the interface communicate that to the web and upload everything so it could be visible to the web. The README file doesn't do anything other than having records of what we have been doing. The YAML file tells all the instructions of what should be done. First of all, that we have on push, the branch is going to be the master one. It's going to take the information from the master repository. This will run in Ubuntu. Ubuntu stands for one of the types of version or types of Linux operative systems. We're going to run this in Python version 3.8. And one of the first instructions is that it's going to install the dependencies from a file called requirement text that is on the repository. And it will start the modules. And here are some exceptions, etc., etc. So it's basically the instructions from the top to bottom. Here on requirements are the modules that we need to run the app. So you might have noticed that the most important section is basically this app UI. The app UI has every single instruction of everything. From the modules to use, from how to call the database, and how to handle the database and transform that into information, how to create the graphs, how to deploy the pages within the HTML files, etc., etc. So from up down, the first thing we do is like we call on the environmental variables, the ones that you define already, and they call it by these names. That's why I was so stringent about rewriting the environmental variables as they were. Then we got some things that are necessary for the app to run. That's basically part of the syntax. This one is information. Is like we are telling that the database taken from this variable is gonna be called database1 from now on, and the outer database taken from this, let's call it a link, is gonna be called the database2 from now on. We are defining the login setting. This is basically a function that help us in having the login page up and running and making it dynamic. We're going to introduce the app within SQL Alchemy. That's for database handling. And the syntax for the database manipulation will be within this class. Class is a type of object within Python where you can declare variables inside the specific class. For instance, we're going to call this emissions, and if I call, for instance, emission kilometers, it's going to throw up the kilometers that it collected from a database one that was defined before, right? So we got in the first section basically all the database manipulation. We have another database that we call super user. That's basically the one that takes the information for logging within the website. Then we have something called super backup that takes all the information and makes a big backup without erasing anything ever. And we have another database called super global, and that's the one that we use for, and I will access now. This is group 1. That's the one that uses information to make this table down here, right? Then we got something called decorators, and that particularly works within Flask. In here, we are declaring that before the very first request to the website, we need to the database needs to be created if they are not created yet, using the standard information from here. Then we got a class for logging records. That's okay. This creates a form. This one, and the submit button are created in here. Then we got a class called add record that basically takes the information from anywhere, any of the forms that we got in there, and transform it to something else that we could use later on. This is a hard coding dictionary of the emissions factors. So if we change the methodology later on, basically this section over here is the one that's going to change the most. This is also another form. I do believe this is specifically for let me enter again. This form is specifically for editing when you want to delete, right? That's what it created there. This is a function that I created to have the specific date of today, so you could make basic things as having this one selecting on the specific day, changing of day by day. This one takes the information from the input that you put in the login and compares the database with our own users database and identify if you belong to a group or if you can access in a specific app, right? So that's what makes people from group 3 to not mingle on group 1 and don't make records on group 1 app, so on and so This verify, and here comes the task done on the login website, and it's the very first one. Once you're done, it redirects you to the homepage, and it uses the HTML called login HTML that is within the GitHub templates, the repository templates. The app root is the homepage, the very same that we call index, starting page. It has information for plotting. It takes out the information from the database that we already called before and introduce those and create the graphs that we've seen here. There's a little button for here. These are basically information for the root. Once again, the template index HTML is within the template section at the repository. We got another page, the page of the inventory. That's the page over here. Check. It gives you the information of all the records that you have introduced. We got several pages. All goes almost on the same way. Everything is done. You make some database manipulation, and then you submit the information to a template so it could update automatically. So there's a bit of handling in here. It's not an easy task, to be honest, though once you get the feeling, then it becomes easier and easier. This is for downloading, setting up downloading option. I have done a couple of things here, so you could have a CSV file at the very end called emissions.csv. And here's just a logout page. Whenever you press out the logout button in here, it redirects you out of the page directly to the login, right? It takes you out of the website. And in here I have included the errors, meaning that when you get a 404 error, that's page not found, it will submit something for you to recognize it, the same for 405 and 500 as explained on task 3. So with that said, I'm closing up optional section number 2. And I hope to have a very engaging conversation on the next week. See you.